The first body was found in a shallow ravine outside the city, partially buried, the earth disturbed just enough to hide what someone did not want seen. The victim was a young girl. Her clothing was torn, her body mutilated in ways that shocked even experienced investigators. This was 1978, and Rostov-on-Don was a growing Soviet city that liked to believe such crimes belonged somewhere else. Police told themselves this was an isolated act, the work of a single disturbed moment. They were wrong. Over the next months, more bodies appeared. Some were discovered near railway stations where thousands passed every day. Others were found in wooded areas, abandoned buildings, or fields just beyond the city limits. The victims shared grim similarities. Most were women and children. Many were poor. Some were homeless. Others were students, commuters, or young workers who never made it home. Their bodies bore stab wounds, sexual mutilation, and injuries suggesting prolonged assaults. In several cases, organs were removed after death. The Soviet system was not built to acknowledge serial murder. Official ideology insisted that such crimes were symptoms of capitalist decay. Investigators were discouraged from linking cases across regions. Files stayed local. Patterns were dismissed. Each murder was treated as a separate incident, and that fragmentation created space for a single offender to continue killing without interruption. Fear spread quietly. Parents warned children not to talk to strangers. Women altered routes and schedules. The killer adapted. He approached victims in public places, appearing harmless, awkward, and unthreatening. Witnesses described him as thin, poorly dressed, and nervous, someone easy to overlook. He used conversation to gain trust, offering directions or help. Once isolated, the violence escalated rapidly and without restraint. Victims were restrained and stabbed repeatedly. The attacks showed extreme rage and a need for control. Forensic reports documented consistent injury patterns, including damage to the eyes and face. In some cases, there were signs of cannibalism, though authorities hesitated to document this openly. Admitting such acts would have meant admitting the existence of a serial predator within Soviet society. Pressure to solve the crimes intensified. Instead of identifying the real killer, police detained men who fit assumptions rather than evidence. Several suspects were coerced into confessing through prolonged interrogation. Courts accepted these confessions despite contradictions and lack of physical proof. Innocent men were convicted and imprisoned. Their families were told justice had been served. Meanwhile, bodies continued to appear. One of the most damaging consequences was the erosion of investigative integrity. Each false confession closed files prematurely. Leads were abandoned. Witness statements were ignored. The killer remained free, moving between regions, selecting victims based on opportunity and vulnerability. A shift came when forensic psychologist Alexander Bukhanovsky analyzed the crimes collectively. He studied locations, victim profiles, and injury patterns. His assessment concluded that a single offender was responsible. He described a man with severe sexual dysfunction, deep insecurity, and a compulsion to kill for psychological release. The profile challenged official thinking, but matched the evidence. By 1990, surveillance increased near transportation hubs where victims had vanished. One man repeatedly drew attention. Andrei Chikatilo was a factory worker with a history of odd behavior and prior arrests for sexual offenses. He was detained after being observed speaking with a young girl near a bus station. Initially, there was no direct evidence, and he was released. Shortly after, another body was found. Chikatilo was arrested again and interrogated extensively. For days, he denied involvement. Then his composure collapsed. He began to confess, describing murders in precise detail. He identified locations, injuries, and victim characteristics that matched unsolved cases. He admitted to killing dozens and to eating parts of some victims. His statements connected crimes across 12 years and multiple regions. Investigators confronted the scale of failure. At least 52 murders were officially attributed to Chikatilo, though the number may be higher. Many victims were children. Others were young women targeted for vulnerability. Each killing followed a consistent pattern of approach, control, mutilation, and abandonment. The trial was chaotic and public. Chikatilo appeared in a cage, shouting, feigning insanity, and attempting to disrupt proceedings. Bukhanovsky testified, calmly explaining the psychological mechanisms behind the crimes and how they had been predicted years earlier. Families of victims listened as details of their loved ones' deaths were presented, some hearing the truth for the first time. In 1994, Andrei Chikatilo was executed by gunshot. After the arrest, attention turned to the men wrongly convicted during the investigation. Files were reopened. Confessions were re-examined. Some prisoners were released after years behind bars for crimes they did not commit. Their lives had been irreversibly damaged, a secondary trail of victims created by the same denial that protected the real killer. Survivors of attempted attacks described encounters that matched Chikatilo's methods. He spoke softly, avoided eye contact, and appeared uncomfortable in conversation. When resisted, his behavior shifted instantly. Violence replaced hesitation. These accounts helped confirm patterns that had been ignored for years. The aftermath forced institutional reckoning. Investigative procedures were revised. Psychological profiling gained legitimacy. Databases improved. The case became a grim teaching example for law enforcement, illustrating how ideology and bureaucracy can obstruct justice. For families of the victims, reform came too late. Memorials replaced unanswered questions. Names once buried in case numbers were spoken aloud. The city learned what it had refused to see, and the cost of that refusal. The murders did not end because the system worked as intended. They ended because reality overwhelmed denial. The damage left behind could not be undone. The lessons drawn from Rostov are now studied internationally, not for shock value, but for the quiet ways failure compounds when warning signs are ignored and accountability is delayed. The cost was measured not just in deaths, but in years lost, trust broken, and truth delayed. Thank you for listening to Homicide Files. Subscribe for more true crime stories.